you make a distinction between an intuitive extrovert and an intuitive introvert. For example, more specifically, what would be an example or a difference between an intuitive extrovert and an intuitive introvert?
Well, you have chosen a somewhat difficult case, because one of the most difficult types is the intuitive introvert.
Yeah.
The intuitive extrovert, you find them all hunters, bankers.
Yeah.
That is quite understandable.
Yeah.
But the introvert the introvert variety is more difficult because he has intuitions as to the subjective factor, namely the inner world. And of course, that is now very difficult to understand because what he sees are most uncommon things. And he doesn't like to talk of them.
Yeah.
If he's not a fool, because he would spoil his own game by telling what he sees, because people won't understand it. For instance, once I had a patient, a young woman, about 27 or 8, and her first words were, when I had seated her, he said, doctor, I come to you because I have a snake in my abdomen. I said, what? Yes, a snake, a black snake, coiled up right in the bottom of my abdomen. And I must have made a rather bewildered face at her. I said, I don't mean it literally, but I should say it was a snake. It was a snake. Now, you see, our further conversation a little later, that was about in the middle of our treatment, that only lasted for 10 consultations. She had foretold me, I got 10 times, and then it's all right. I said, how do you know? Oh, I got a hunch, she said. And really, about the 5th or 6th hour, she said, doctor, I must tell you, the snake has risen. It is now about here. Punch. And then on the 10th day, I say, now, this is our last hour. And do you feel cured? And she said, beaming, she said, this warning, it came up and came out of my mouth, and the head was golden. And those were her last words. Now, you see, that same girl, when it comes to reality, she came to me because she couldn't hear the step of her feet anymore, because she walked on air, literally. She couldn't hear it. That frightened her. And when she came to me, I asked her for her address. And then she said, oh, bonjour, so-and-so. When it is not just called bonjour, but it is a sort of bonjour. I never had heard of it. Now, I'm curious, I never have heard of that place. Well, it's a very nice place, she said. You're curious enough, there are only young girls there, very nice and very lively young girls. And they have a merry time. I often wish they would invite me to their merry evenings. And I said, but they amuse themselves all alone. Oh, no, there are plenty of young gentlemen coming in, and they have a beautiful time, but they never invite me. It turned out that it was a private brothel. I said, she was perfectly decent girl, of a very good family. Not from here. She had found that place, I don't know how. And she was utterly unaware that they were all prostitutes. I said, for heaven's sake, you fell into a very dark place. You hastened to get out of it. You see, that was her sensation.
Yeah.
She didn't see reality, but she had hunches like anything, and there came more. Now, you see, such a person cannot possibly speak of her experiences, because everybody would think she's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I myself was quite shocked when I thought, for heaven's sake, is that case schizophrenia. Because you don't hear that kind of speech. But she assumed that the old man, of course, knows everything, and he even doesn't understands such kind of language. So you see, if the introverted intuitive would speak what he really perceives, then back and over to the other side, he would be misunderstood. And so they learn to keep things to themselves, and you hardly ever hear them talking of these things. That is a great disadvantage, but it is an enormous advantage in another way. Not to speak of the experience they gather in that respect, but also in human relations. For instance, they come into the presence of somebody they don't know, and suddenly they have inner images. And those inner images give them a more or less complete information about the psychology of the partner. That is, but the case can also happen that they come into the presence of somebody who they don't know at all, not from Adam, and they know an important piece out of the biography of that person, and are not aware of it. So the introverted intuitive has, in a way, a very difficult life, although one of the most interesting lives.
Yeah.
But it is difficult often to get into their confidence,
Yeah, because you say they're afraid that people will think they're sick.
The things that are interesting to them or are vital to them are utterly strange to the ordinary individual. But the psychologists should know of such things, you see. You see, when people make psychology as a psychologist what to do, well, the very first question is he extroverted or is he introvert?
Yeah.
If we look at entirely different things, is he a sensation type? Is he an intuitive type? Is he thinking? Is he feeling? Because you see, these things are complicated, that they are still more complicated because the introverted thinker, for instance, is compensated by extroverted feeling, or by inferior extroverted, archaic extroverted feeling. So an introverted thinker may be very crude in his feeling, like, for instance, the introverted philosopher that is always carefully avoiding women will be married by his crook in the end.